Every year, climbers chase the summit of Mount Everest. Some make history, others never make it back. These are the most horrible deaths ever recorded on the world's deadliest peak, Tsewang Paljor. In May 1996, a historic expedition set out from the east side of Mount Everest. The Indo-Tibetan Border Police, led by Commandant Mohinder Singh, was attempting India's first climb from this side. Among the team were Subedar Tsewang Smanla, Lance Naik Dorje Morup, and Head Constable Tsewang Paljor, 3 climbers carrying not only heavy gear, but also the hopes of their country. On 10th May, the 3 climbers pushed through a strong blizzard, getting very close to the summit. While 3 members of their 6-person team wisely turned back, Smanla, Morup, and Paljor decided to go on. Around 3:45 p.m. Nepal time, they radioed their expedition leader to say they had reached the top. Smanla spent a little extra time performing a small ceremony, leaving prayer flags, katas, and pitons as a sacred offering to the mountain, and told his friends to start going down. After that, there was no more radio contact. From the camps below, team members could see faint headlamps moving near the second step, at over 8,500 meters, but the 3 climbers never made it back to high camp. The thin air, cold, and sudden blizzard claimed their lives that day. Tsewang Paljor, later known as the climber wearing green boots, became famous as Green Boots, a silent marker of the deadly northeast route of Everest. Later, a team of Japanese climbers from Fukuoka reported seeing people on the trail. They thought these climbers were from a different group and did not realize they were the missing Indians. Only later did they learn 3 climbers were missing and tried to help, but the harsh weather and high altitude made rescue impossible. At first, there were misunderstandings and criticism, but later everyone agreed that no one had purposely left anyone behind. The story of Tsewang Paljor and his teammates is remembered for their bravery. Even after reaching the very top of the world, the mountain showed its danger. Everest reminds everyone that climbing to the summit is only half the challenge. The way back down can be even more deadly. Victor Brinza. In 2019, Everest experienced what would later be described as its deadliest climbing season. Long lines formed near the summit. Climbers waited for hours in the death zone, and the margin between survival and collapse grew dangerously thin. It was in this environment that Victor Brinza, a climber from Moldova, made his attempt on the world's highest peak. Brinza successfully reached the summit of Everest. For many climbers, that moment represents the end of the struggle. On Everest, it is often the beginning of the most dangerous phase. After summiting, Victor began his descent toward the South Col, the high camp located at approximately 7,900 meters. By this point, climbers are deep in the death zone, where oxygen levels are too low for the human body to function properly for extended periods. Judgment fades, muscles weaken, and even small delays can become fatal. That season, traffic on the mountain was severe. Climbers were forced to wait in narrow sections, burning precious energy while standing still in extreme cold and thin air. The descent, already harder than the ascent, became even more punishing. Near the South Col, Victor Brinza began to struggle. At that altitude, rescue options are extremely limited. Carrying or evacuating a climber requires multiple Sherpas, favorable weather, and time resources that are often unavailable in the death zone. Despite efforts to assist him, Victor Brinza died near the South Col, his body succumbing to the combined effects of altitude, exhaustion, and prolonged exposure. He became one of several climbers who lost their lives not while climbing upward, but while trying to make it back down, where Everest claims many of its victims. His death was one among many that season, unlike other dramatic accidents. Victor's death was quieter and in many ways more haunting. Pas Tenji Sherpa. On May 21, 2024, high above the South Col route on Mount Everest, Daniel Paul Patterson, a 40-year-old British climber, and his 23-year-old Sherpa guide, Pas Tenji Sherpa, successfully reached the summit. At 4:40 a.m., their goal was achieved. The highest point on Earth stood behind them. But on Everest, the summit is only the halfway point. The descent is where exhaustion peaks, oxygen thins further, and small mistakes become fatal. After leaving the summit, Patterson and Pas Tenji began their descent along the standard route. Somewhere high on the mountain, near the most exposed sections, the pair lost contact with the rest of the Sherpa. No radio response followed. No confirmed sighting came after that moment. As hours passed, concern turned into alarm. It is believed that both men fell from the route and plunged down the Kangshung Face, a vast, steep, and almost inaccessible wall on Everest's eastern side. A fall there offers no chance of survival and almost no chance of recovery. Once a climber disappears over that edge, the mountain keeps them. Search operations were launched immediately. Multiple Sherpa guides were deployed, each reportedly paid up to 600,000 Nepalese rupees for the mission. They searched every physically accessible area, traversing dangerous terrain while already exhausted from their own summit pushes. But Everest does not yield easily. The Kangshung Face drops nearly 1,000 meters into sheer cliffs and broken ice, far beyond where rescuers can safely descend. After days of searching with no sign of Patterson or Pas Tenji, the decision no one wants to make was finally made. The search was called off. Pemba Sherpa, managing director of 8K Expedition, confirmed that all Sherpas involved had been recalled to base camp. The families, embassy officials, and authorities were informed. The reason was simple and brutal. Continuing the search would almost certainly cost more lives. "We looked everywhere that was reachable," he explained. "We can't risk the lives of guides by pressing them to go down a cliff 1,000 meters below the main trail." With the search halted, Daniel Paul Patterson and Pas Tenji Sherpa were officially presumed dead. Today, Pas Tenji Sherpa and Daniel Paul Patterson join the long list of climbers who never came home, their remains unrecovered, their final moments known only to the mountain itself. Subrata Ghosh. Subrata Ghosh's final climb ended just meters below the highest point on Earth, at 45 years old. Ghosh had traveled from West Bengal, India, to Mount Everest with a single goal: to stand on the summit of the world. After weeks of preparation, that goal was finally within reach. On the day of his summit push, conditions allowed him and his Sherpa guide, Champal Tamang, to continue upward despite the brutal altitude. At around 2 p.m., Subrata Ghosh reached the summit of Everest. It was late in the day for a summit, but the climb was successful. For a brief moment, he stood above all nations and landscapes, having overcome exhaustion, cold, and thin air to reach 8,849 meters. But Everest does not end at the top, and the clock was already working against him. Soon after beginning the descent, Ghosh's condition began to deteriorate. Just below the Hillary Step, one of Everest's most infamous and dangerous sections, he showed clear signs of severe exhaustion and altitude sickness. At that height, the body is starved of oxygen, decision-making slows, and physical strength can disappear suddenly. Then came the most dangerous moment of all. Despite Tamang's efforts to get him to descend, Subrata Ghosh refused to continue downward. Whether due to confusion, physical collapse, or the overwhelming effects of altitude sickness, he was no longer able or willing to move. In the death zone, stopping is often fatal. Climbers cannot rest meaningfully, and every minute spent motionless drains the body further. The location made rescue almost impossible. With daylight fading and Ghosh unable to continue, Champal Tamang was faced with an impossible decision. Eventually, Tamang was forced to descend alone to survive. He reached Camp 4 late that night, exhausted, carrying devastating news. He reported that Subrata Ghosh had died just below the Hillary Step during the descent. Bodhraj Bhandari of Snowy Horizon Treks later confirmed the death as reported by the Himalayan Times. Plans were initiated to attempt recovery of Ghosh's body and transport it to base camp, though such operations at extreme altitude are dangerous, costly, and far from guaranteed. Subrata Ghosh's climb ended, a sobering reminder that on Everest, survival is never assured until the climber is safely back down. Joshua Cheruiyot Kirui. Joshua Cheruiyot Kirui, a climber from Kenya, had set himself a bold and historic goal: to become the first African to summit Everest without supplemental oxygen. While thousands had reached the top before him, Kirui sought a far greater challenge. Climbing Everest has been done before. I think the only difference is what I'm trying to do, climbing without supplemental oxygen. No African has done that. It's the tough way to climb Mount Everest, he had told reporters. His plan was not reckless. He was deliberate, aware of the dangers, and had arranged emergency oxygen to be ferried by his Sherpa guide, Nawang Sherpa, should the climb become unmanageable. On May 22, 2024, Kirui and Nawang began their summit push from Camp 4 at the South Col, approximately 26,000 feet, 7,925 meters above sea level. The climb took them into the death zone, where oxygen levels are dangerously low and human life cannot be sustained for long. The mountain does not forgive fatigue, mistakes, or misjudgment at that altitude. As they approached the summit, radio contact with base camp was lost. Reports later indicated that Kirui had refused to descend, despite the extreme risk. At Bishop Rock, 28,904 feet, 8,810 meters, Nawang Sherpa communicated that Kirui was exhibiting abnormal behavior. Kirui had anticipated this possibility. Before the climb, he had written that Nawang would provide an emergency oxygen bottle if I go lights out or if I go bananas. If body limit reached when I realize I'm no Superman. These precautions highlighted his awareness of Everest's deadly reality, yet nothing could eliminate the inherent danger of pushing the human body to its extreme. Tragically, Kirui's climb ended just 157 feet, 48 meters from the summit, at an altitude of 28,872 feet, 8,800 meters. He fell into a crevasse, his body later discovered by the rescue team. Nawang Sherpa, age 44, remained missing, lost somewhere in the death zone. Kirui's family made the difficult decision to leave his body on the mountain, recognizing both the danger involved in recovery and his profound connection to the peaks. Cheruiyot had a profound love for the mountains, and they loved him in return. We find solace in knowing he rests in his happy place, his family said, acknowledging the impossibility of retrieval and honoring his final resting place. Joshua Cheruiyot. Kirui's story is one of extraordinary ambition, courage, and the limits of human endurance. He climbed to the roof of the world without supplemental oxygen, achieved what few could imagine, and paid the ultimate price. Even as his family mourned, they extended prayers for Nawang Sherpa and for all those lost on Everest, knowing that the mountain claims many quietly, leaving only memory, respect, and a sobering reminder of human fragility against nature's extremes. Binod Babu Bastakoti. In the 2024 Everest climbing season, Binod Babu Bastakoti, a 37-year-old climber, achieved what many only dream of. He successfully reached the summit of Mount Everest. For a Nepali climber, standing on the highest point on Earth carries a deep personal and cultural significance. But as Everest has proven time and again, reaching the top is only half the journey. After turning back from the top, Bastakoti began his descent toward the South Col, passing through the rock face area, a steep, exposed section near the high camp. At nearly 8,000 meters, he was deep inside the death zone, where oxygen levels are insufficient to sustain human life for long periods and where the brain is especially vulnerable to hypoxia. During the descent, something began to go wrong. Binod Babu Bastakoti started behaving abnormally. His actions suggested the severe effects of altitude sickness, a condition that can cause confusion, agitation, loss of judgment, and sudden personality changes. Recognizing that Bastacoty's condition was deteriorating, his guide left briefly to retrieve supplemental oxygen, hoping it would stabilize him enough to continue the descent. At that altitude, every minute matters, and even short delays can have irreversible consequences. When the guide returned, the situation had worsened. Bastacoty was found aggressively resisting movement, no longer responsive to instructions. Shortly afterward, he removed his clothing and oxygen mask, a deeply alarming sign at extreme altitude. Moments later, Binod Babu Bastacoty died near the rock face close to the South Col. His death was confirmed by Rakesh Gurung, spokesperson for Nepal's Department of Tourism, making Bastacoty the fourth fatality of the 2024 Everest expedition season. Officials stated that the exact cause of death would be determined after an autopsy, but the circumstances pointed strongly toward the devastating effects of altitude sickness during descent. Binod Babu Bastacoty reached the summit of Mount Everest, but like so many before him, he did not survive the journey back. Daniel Paul Patterson. In May 2024, Patterson, 39, from Wakefield, UK, stood on the summit of Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth, at 29,032 feet, 8,849 meters. He had reached the goal he had been chasing for most of his life. Alongside his 23-year-old Sherpa guide, Pas Tenji Sherpa, Patterson was part of an expedition organized by 8K Expeditions, climbing with a larger group that had pushed for the summit that day. For Patterson, this climb was deeply personal. He was climbing not only for himself, but to raise money for the family of a gym member who had recently died of cancer. In a social media post just days before the summit on the 16th of May, Patterson wrote that climbing Everest had been his goal for most of my life. He spoke openly about the sacrifice behind the attempt, 18 months of preparation, training, and commitment, and made his mindset clear. One thing I can guarantee is that I won't be quitting. On Tuesday, Patterson and Pas Tenji Sherpa successfully reached the summit as part of the group. But on Everest, reaching the top does not mean safety. The most dangerous part of the climb often begins after the summit. When climbers are exhausted, oxygen levels are critically low, and daylight is running out. During the descent somewhere near the Hillary Step, contact with Patterson and his guide was lost. The company reported that Daniel Patterson and Pas Tenji Sherpa fell down the mountain toward the Tibet side, dropping through a steep vertical face. Once over that edge, survival is virtually impossible. Rescue teams were mobilized, but the terrain quickly became clear. The Tibet side of the mountain is inaccessible from the Nepal route, and helicopters cannot fly in that area or at that altitude. Rescuers were unable to reach the location, and no sign of the two climbers was found. After exhaustive but limited efforts, 8K Expeditions confirmed that the chances of finding them alive were not possible. Daniel Patterson and Pas Tenji Sherpa were reported missing and presumed dead. Daniel Patterson achieved what he had worked toward for most of his life. He reached the top of the world. But near the Hillary Step, in the death zone where the margin for survival disappears, the mountain ended its journey. The mountain keeps their bodies, but we keep their stories alive. Every step they took, every risk they accepted, deserves to be remembered. If these stories reminded you how fragile life is at the top of the world, take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe so their names are never forgotten.